and now line the shorish nun aleph. No, not aleph. Excuse me. Ayin. I did it. I said it wrong. Ayin lamed is related to lock.
Right. Now is to lock. Right. So a shoe is an enclosure. It locks our feet. It actually makes our feet in many ways less healthy unless you have Vivo barefoot. But so I heard that and I was like, okay, I can live with that. I can live with let go of the stuff that holds you there before you can come to speak to me. Yeah, David.
Right when he would come up to. Yeah. He'd be state the shoes. Yeah. And I don't know if he did it this year or not, but that was. No, he did. He did do it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that, if I remember correctly, there was some moment of.
Because he's coming from
Convention to tell you.
don't take off your shoes. He takes off his shoes. How we get
Yes.
The other, none of us. I guess that's the other.
True.
True in its own way.
We have exactly a minute.
We have a member, right?
Hi.
Yes.
A little bit. Yeah. The following week, I started with the following week.
Okay, so it gets to Kelly Sussman. So, layers upon layers of this, right? So she was last time a week ago. Here below, I
thought I was
see
better.
her forever, and then we better get connected after her. She got one. She gets her cross.
Because the divine love manifests within now.
They partially own the giant. So even better. So her mother was here last time on, and I made some disparaging comment about the Giants. And she read me the right after I need to tell her. I was like, this is the best thing ever. This is exactly why I'm a Giants fan. Like, you should hold these things out. I mean, I turned out correct about the
I'm
season.
gonna show my red convertible to them.
In the garage though, that's like, it's so interesting. Oh, yes, I'm on, but, I want.
Next door, he had a blurb on the site.
It's so fast.
Garage to rent.
What,
We call it.
You can say no. You can say no. I don't, we can throw you in there. That's it. All right. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom, guys. Great to see you. Great to see you. How is everybody? Good, good. Oh, no kidding.
So now I'm out to dinner with them.
What?
And then we did this. He's like, wait a second.
Oh my God. That is a small world. That's a small world. That's crazy. Amazing. All right. That really is wild. Like, 'cause now it's like 7 different steps of connection. That's wild. How are they doing? Because they're expecting one soon, right?
She's born.
Amazing.
She's 5 months.
That's great news. That's great news. Now I ran into his father-in-law at Candy Kitchen like a few months ago. So wild, just wild. All right, Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Shalom.
Okay, so I think we're going to invite up Andrew Fagan, who's going to light and bless our Shabbat candles. And as we continue to do, we continue to light our 2 sets of candles, one set for us here in Sag Harbor and the other for the hostages. And finally, for the first time in a very long time, not all, but some, we hope within the next few days, will be able to light their candles again on their own. But we will continue to light these 2 sets until every one of them is home. We're on page 120. Page 120. What's it?
Next Friday.
Yeah, I don't know if we're quite back to dancing yet, but we're, God willing. Oh, thank you, Will. I've been negligent in my duties.
No.
Jack Benny.
Amen.
Amen.
commanding us to kindle the light of Shabbat.
Amen.
Andrea, thank you very much. Okay, and we'll turn now to begin Kabbalat Shabbat together. And a reminder, as I brought back a teaching last week, and a reminder for all of us that Kabbalat Shabbat, amongst many things, has a number of different purposes. One is simple, which is celebration. Right? Shabbat requires of us to celebrate and to be joyful. But when the Kabbalists really helped to formulate this service, they could have created entirely new everything. Right? There is Kabbalistic stuff in here, L'chad Odi being the most obvious, some things that are not in our prayer book. But they relied on the Psalms as the core essence of what this service is really all about. And that each of these Psalms, again, corresponding to a different day of the week leading up to Shabbat, is again a reminder to us that as we enter Shabbat, we can't just leave the week behind, and we can't just jump right into something either. There's this sort of meeting point between the two. So when we get to each of the Psalms, really try your best to connect with your last week, whatever has been going on in your life, and then together, collectively, we get to Shabbat at the end and celebrate together. So with that, we'll turn to page 130, and we'll join with student cantor Will as we begin Kabbalat Shabbat at the very top of page 130.
Lechu neronen al Adonai naria letzor ishenu. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena al Adonai. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena al Adonai. Naria, naria, letzor ishenu nekadma fana betoda. Naria, naria, letzor ishenu bizmirot naria lo. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena al Adonai. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena al Adonai.
We're now on page 131, the 96th Psalm.
Shiru l'Adonai, shir chadash, shiru l'Adonai kol haaretz, shiru l'Adonai baruchu shemo, basru miyom leyom yeshuato, safru vagoyim kevodo bechol ha'amim niflotav ki gadol Adonai umhulal meod norahu al kol Elohim yai lai lai shiru l'Adonai shir chadash shiru l'Adonai kol haaretz shiru l'Adonai baruchu shemo basru miyom leyom yeshuato.
We'll turn now to page 132, or Zarua, toward the very bottom of the page.
Or zarua latzadik uleishrei simcha. Or zarua latzadik uleishrei simcha. Simchu tzadikim b'Adonai vehodu lezecher kodsho. Simchu tzadikim b'Adonai vehodu lezecher kodsho.
We'll turn now to page 134, Zamru l'Adonai, at the very top of the page.
Zamru l'Adonai bechinor, bechinor vekol zimra, b'chatzotzorot vekol shofar, harim lifnei hamelech Adonai. Zamru l'Adonai בכינור, בכינור וקול זמרה, בחצוצרות וקול שופר, הריעו לפני המלך אדוני, ירם הים ומלואו, תבל ויושביו, נהרות ימחאו כף יחד, הרים ירננו לפני אדוני קיווה, לשפוט הארץ, ישפוט תבל בצדק, ועמים במישרים. ירם הים ומלואו, תבל ויושביו, נהרות ימחאו כף יחד, הרים ירננו.
We're now on page 135, the last Hebrew paragraph in the middle of the page, Romamu.
רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו.
We turn now to page 136, the 29th Psalm, a psalm for Friday, at the top of the page.
מזמור לדוד, הבו לאדוני בני אלים, הבו לאדוני כבוד ועוז, הבו לאדוני כבוד שמו, השתחוו לאדוני בהדרת קודש. כל אדוני המים אל הכבוד הרים, אדוני מים רבים, אדוני מים רבים. כל אדוני בכוח, כל אדוני בהדר, כל אדוני שובר ארזים, וישבר אדוני את ארזי הלבנון, וירקידם כמו עגל לבנון, וסריון כמו בן רמים, כמו בן רמים. כל אדוני חוצב להבות אש, כל אדוני יכיל מדבר, יכיל אדוני מדבר קדש. כל אדוני יחולל לילות, ויחשוף ימות, ובחלו כולו מרכבות, כולו מרכבות, כולו מרכבות. אדוני למבול ישב, וישב אדוני מלך לעולם. אדוני עוז עמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו
Shalom.
We turn now to L'chado D on page 138, and we'll do the first, second, fifth, and ninth paragraphs. For the final paragraph, we'll rise and face the door as we walked through just a few moments ago.
Lecha dodi likrot kala penei Shabbat nekabla nekabela. Lecha dodi likrot kala penei Shabbat nekabla nekabela. Shamor vezachor b'dibur echad. Hishmianu el hamyuchad. Adonai echad ushmo echad. Leshem utiferet velitila. Lecha dodi likrot kala penei Shabbat nekabla nekabela. Lecha dodi likrot kala penei Shabbat nekabla nekabela. Likrot Shabbat lechu v'nelcha ki hi mekor haberacha. Merosh mikedem nesucha sof ma'aseh b'machshavat tchila. Lecha dodi likrot kala penei Shabbat nekabla nekabela. Lecha dodi likrot kala penei Shabbat nekabla nekabela. Hitoreri kiva ore kumiorim. Uri shir daberi kevod Adonai alaych nigla. Lecha dodi likrot kala penei Shabbat nekabla nekabela. Lecha dodi likrot kala penei Shabbat nekabla nekabela. Boi veshalom ateret bala gam besimcha uvtzola. Tochem uneam segula. Boi chala. Lecha dodi likrot kala penei Shabbat nekabla nekabela. Lecha dodi likrot kala penei Shabbat nekabla nekabela.
Please be seated. We're now on page 140. Yeah.
Tzadikat amarifrach kerez balvanon iske shetulim bevet Adonai bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu od yenhuvun beseva deshenim verananim lehagid ki ashar Adonai tzuri velo avlatabo.
rise in body or spirit for the Chatzi Kaddish on page 144 and remain standing for the Baruch Hu on the next page. Yitkadal ve'yitkadash shemei Rabba
Amen.
Ve'alma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei
B'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayedecho Beit Yisrael Bagala uvizman kariv ve'imeru Amen. Yeshmei Rabba mevarach La'alam li'almei almaya Yitbarach Yitbarach v'yishtabach V'yitvar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemei dekudsha b'richu Leila min kol berchata v'shirata Tushbechata v'nechemata Damiran be'alma ve'imeru Amen. Baruchu et Adonai hamevorach. Baruch Adonai hamvorach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hamevorach leolam va'ed. Please be seated. Let's read together now on the bottom of page 149 in English. This is an hour of change. Within it we stand uncertain on the border of light. Shall we draw back or cross over? Where shall our hearts turn? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? This is the hour of change, and within it we stand quietly on the border of light. What lies before us? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over?
Havir yom u'mevi layla, mavdil ben yom u'vein layla, Adonai tzavaot shemo, El chai v'kayam, tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai,
Baruch Shemo.
Amari v'aravi.
Amen. Let's turn now to page 151, and we'll read together in English toward the top of the page. As you taught Torah to those whose names I bear, teach me Torah too. Its mystery beckons, yet I struggle with its truth. You meant Torah for me. Did you mean the struggle for me too? Don't let me struggle alone. Help me to understand, to be wise, to listen, to know. Lead me into the mystery.
Ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu, v'hem nege yomam v'layla, ve'avatecha tasir mimenu le'olamim. Baruch atah Adonai,
Baruch Shemo.
ohev amo Yisrael.
Amen.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Please join us on page 154.
Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha ve'hayu ha'devarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzarecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha v'beitecha u'v'lechtecha b'derech Ushokbecha uvkumecha, ushartam leot al yadecha, ve'hayu letotafot beinecha, uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha, uvisharecha. Leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai, v'item kedoshim leloechem, ani Adonai Elohechem, asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, Liot lachem Elohim, ani Adonai Elohechem.
Adonai Elohechem Emet. Let's read together now on the top of page 157. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together. As we turn to page 158.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, Torah tehilot osefele, nora tehilot osefele. Malechutecha ra'u vanecha, bokei ayam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam, zelianu ve'amru, zelianu ve'ameru, Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed, Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed. V'ne'emar kifad Adonai et Yaakov, Ugalom yad chazak mimenu, Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael.
Amen. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will. Hashkivenu is on page 160.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom vehamitenu shomereinu lechaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom vehamitenu shomereinu lechaim. Ushmor tzeitenu uvoenu lechaim ushalom me'ata ve'ad olam. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom ve'hamitenu shomereinu lechaim. Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim.
Amen. We turn now to Vishamru on page 162.
Veshamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
Invite us now to rise in body or spirit as we begin the Amidah together on page 164. From that point on, we'll continue silently. As always, please go at your own pace. When you're finished at the end, if you're still standing, you may be seated.
Adonai sefatai tiftachu fi agit tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Yehi hu leratzon imrefi vegion libi lefanecha Adonai tzuri Adonai tzuri vegoali vegoali.
We'll turn now to page 371 as we offer our Misha Berach, our healing prayer for this evening. We'll begin by first thinking of those in our community who we know are in need of that healing tonight. Tonight we're thinking of Bart, Allegra Himmel, Nicholas, Madeline Egelfeld, Rachel Bat Marsha, Sue Wartor, Abigail Blum, Kate Sherwood, Bensi Tepper, Ame and Warren Cass, Rivka Bat Rachel, Lorraine Danis, David Dowling, Sibia Devora Bat Francis, Shelley Newmark, Diane Axelrod, Gabriella Spicer, David Kyle Klopman, Lorraine Davis, Kim Birnbaum, Deborah Block Kroll, Sylvia Orn, Rachel Bat Ora, Peretz Ben Shlomo, and Israel Ben Yitzchak. In addition to those names, of course, we're still praying for and thinking of the entire community in Los Angeles as well. And we'll invite an opportunity for those that are with us here tonight. If you want to add additional names, we'll start on this side of the room and then work towards the back and then this side. And if you have names to share, please just raise a hand so I don't miss anybody.
Jody Manuel, Jackie Manuel, Donna Gesper, Kimberly Espinoza, Chris Hubbard, Linda Lanigan, Kelly Mulholland, and Lee. Simpowski family, Diane Schultz, Shelley Maureen Henry, Mario, Henry Rodman, Lee Judah, Judy Wilson, Lauren, Rick Gold, Joel, Laura, Erin Rubin, Noel, Nancy Cooper, Sophia, Martin Newmark, Itzy, Kay Chandler, Eileen Crimmins, Patricia, Maureen Groden, Bart, Karen A., and Meredith Burkett.
Esther Batsara.
First, we invite those watching at home to add the names of your loved ones as well. We'll join together with Will on page 371, just in the middle of the page.
Misheberach avotenu mekor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach imotenu Mekor habracha avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
We now offer our prayer for Israel in time of war. Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, our God and God of our ancestors, you know that the Jewish people are one nation with one heart, and now that heart is broken. O healer of broken hearts, binder of their wounds, be with our brothers and sisters who have been taken captive, and with the families of the victims. Watch over the hostages, break their bonds, and bring them out from darkness to light. Proclaim release to the captives, liberation to the imprisoned. Comfort the families, bring them under the shelter of your wings. Bring complete healing of body and spirit to all of the wounded. Bind up our wounds and grant us healing. Tzur Yisrael, v'go'alo, rock and redeemer of the people Israel. Bless the state of Israel, the initial manifestation of our redemption. Shield it with your care, spread over it your shelter of peace. Guide its leaders and advisors with your light and your truth. Grace them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who defend us. Crown their efforts with victory. Bless the land with peace, its inhabitants with lasting joy. Shomer Yisrael, guardian of Israel. Strengthen and bless the defenders of Israel who stand guard on the land, in the air, and on the sea. May we see the promise of the psalmist realized. You turn my mourning into dancing, my sackcloth into robes of joy. God, protect, preserve, and restore peace and well-being to Israel, your people, and together we say,
Amen.
Amen. Shabbat shalom, everyone. We've been saying that prayer now for quite a long time, and for quite a long time now walked past the very large TV screen as you enter the temple on Friday nights and Saturday mornings, drawing our attention, of course, to the plight of the hostages. And it's the first time in a very long time where there is a very real hope that by Sunday, at some point in Israel time, that not all, certainly not all, but a number of, I think, 33, right? 33. And, you know, as I was talking to our executive director, Hebrew School director, Shelley, who herself is Israeli, you know, the challenge of these moments, these couple of days in between, is because, you know, anything can sort of happen. Even if you have a deal on paper, you're not really sure until they're right across and they're in the hands of their loved ones. You don't know. And in particular, it's the most fraught time because it's when the most lunatic fringes will try everything they can to get in the way of things like this taking place. And so I hold my breath. I mean, and I know I'm not the only one. I'm holding my breath really until Sunday, and will continue to hold my breath until really every single one of them is able to come home. But it is really striking to finally have some sense of that possibility, because it was starting to feel each day like it was less and less likely. And, you know, the one thing I will say, and I will say time and time again, is that it's very easy for all of us outside of the small rooms where these things have been negotiated for the last, you know, many months. It's easy to point and say, this is what should have happened, this is what could happen, this is what ought to happen, but it's terribly fraught and complicated negotiations. And part of the reason why that's the case is because in any negotiation, especially anything like this, there are things that have to be given up. And when, you know, that's what I was talking to Shelley about, she couldn't wrap her head around the idea of the math of it all, right? One hostage for 30 or 40 or 50 odd people, and many of those people, even in the initial rounds, are people who were, you know, held for reasons, significant reasons. And even more challengingly, that the data shows that when there has been release of, for example, captives on the Israeli side, right, people who have been either arrested or held because of terrorist actions, that when they are freed, they go back immediately to what they were doing before. And so there is an inherent understanding that taking this agreement upon it, forgetting even for a second what happens with the IDF in Gaza and the complications of that, this is a major, major issue for Israelis across the political spectrum. That said, one of the most striking and troubling things for me, and has been no surprise to those that are members of the congregation, of a couple of people in the Israeli government who have tried and are continuing to try to scuttle the deal. They won't succeed in this particular case, but they have, and again, not quietly, right? Not in a quiet fashion, not behind the scenes, not in code, you know, outwardly said that to agree to this deal is basically to, in effect, right, to destroy the state of Israel, potentially to destroy the state of Israel. So the primary voice in this, primary voice really is Itamar Ben-Gvir, a member of Knesset of the party Otzma Yehudit, who, if I'm not mistaken, is the National Security Cabinet member. Do you know? Well, I think that's right. I'm pretty sure that's right. And another party that is aligned with it, the Religious Zionist Party, and its leader Bezalel Smotrich. And Ben-Gvir in particular, right, has been the most vocal in saying that his group would in effect leave the government if this were to be agreed upon. Remains to be seen whether or not that's the case. And the deliberations, even after, again, as I said, right, Hamas tried to add various things at the last minute, which was not a surprise to me in the slightest. And the conversation was happening in the cabinet up until Shabbat, to the point in which, and this is, again, a unique quality of Israeli politics, that members of the security cabinet had to leave because Shabbos was coming in, and they could not remain in the conversation. This is the leaders of the UTJ, United Torah Judaism Party, which represents the Haredi Ashkenazi, and the leaders of the Shas Party, which represents, generally speaking, the Sephardic and Mizrahi communities, ultra-Orthodox communities. But they supported the agreement enough that they left notes basically saying, we will agree to this if it is voted upon. This is our vote, and our vote is positive. And sort of somewhat ironic, in a sense, that the slightly less religious but more nationalists, right, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, were the ones who, in the end, potentially were going to hold this up. And, at the same time, right, part of what they are saying is exactly what I said at the beginning. Okay? Even if they represent a much more extreme view, certainly much more extreme view than I hold, what they are voicing is something that even moderate Israelis will have to come to acknowledge, which is that in order for the hostages to be freed, especially in all phases of this, there are going to be some serious risks taken by the state of Israel. There's going to be some painful giving back of individuals who, quite frankly, in my estimation, ought to remain behind bars. There is going to be significant risk of loss of certain progress made in the war in Gaza by ultimately pulling back. These are points that are not just his that are being made. But the balance, and the reason why, again, the ultra-Orthodox support this, is that even with all of that said, the returning of hostages in the end is more essential than any of that. So, as it happens, there's an interesting piece of Agadah, of Midrash, that's found in the Talmud and Masechet Sota, and I don't know whether, Will, you've ever come across this particular teaching before, but I'll share it, and it is not by any means a one-to-one. So I want to say that at the outset. But there was something about it that struck me in this conversation as important. It's important for all of us to consider. It's important, especially, I think, for Mr. Ben-Gvir and his partners to consider as well. So it talks about a moment before actually Moses is born. This week we read in Parshat Shemot, we begin the story of the Exodus, we begin the story of Moses and his family, and remind her again that while in our mind, right, Moses is our sort of preeminent figure, his sister Miriam is the elder, right? She is there before he even comes into the world. And so there is this piece of Agadah that teaches as follows. Amram, who was the father of Moses, was known as the greatest man of his generation. So he's somebody that everybody ultimately respected. And once he saw that the wicked Pharaoh had decreed, every son that is born you shall cast into the river, quoting from this week's Parsha, from chapter 1, verse 22, he says to himself, we are laboring for nothing by bringing children into the world just for them to be killed. Therefore, in the logical mind, he arose and he divorced his wife. Okay? Now, because he was such a great person, everybody else saw this happening, took on his logic, and did exactly the same thing. Every single one of them divorced all of their wives. We're going to leave that element to the side for right now as to what, that experience was like. But his wise daughter Miriam then comes to him and says, Father, your decree, if you think about it, is even more harsh for the Jewish people than that of Pharaoh. Pharaoh decreed only with regard to the male children, but you decreed both on the males and on the females. And now, no children will be born. In other words, if they all divorced, I'll leave the science out of this for everybody, but right, no more children. Okay? Additionally, she says, Pharaoh decreed to kill them only in this world, but by you doing this, you've decreed that they are killed in this world and in the world to come, because according to the tradition, if they're not born, they can't go to whatever that next world ultimately is. And she finishes, right? She continues, said, additionally, concerning Pharaoh the wicked, it is uncertain whether his decree will be fulfilled, and it's uncertain if his decree will not be fulfilled. In other words, we don't know what's going to happen. You, however, are a righteous person, and as such, our tradition decrees that yours will certainly be fulfilled. And then it quotes from the book of Job, you shall also decree a thing, and it shall be established unto you. Proof text, as it were. And then, only then, Amram accepted his daughter's words, arose, remarried his wife, and all the others followed the same example, and ultimately Moses is born. Now, as I said, this teaching is not by any means a one-to-one kind of translation, but let me try to draw the line that I see in this and my concern about it. Amram's response to the tragedy of Pharaoh's decree is, on the one hand, a logical response. What he says to himself at first is, why would we bring children into the world just for them ultimately to be killed? Okay? In Ben-Gvir's mind, why would we give back soldiers to the other side? Why would we give back territory to them just for them to kill us again? Similar kind of thinking, similar kind of logic. And in the end, right, that decision is one that, especially when you're in a leadership position and you express your position that way, others will follow. The problem is, as Miriam really brilliantly points out, is there is an uncertainty in what's going to happen. There is risk inherent to this decision. But if, for example, the state of Israel were not to do everything in its power to return its citizens home, if it was not to do everything in its power to bring back children, the elderly, the infirmed, and especially, or not especially, but certainly important, soldiers, right? Soldiers who serve in defense of the state of Israel, if they were to be left forever in captivity, only out of the risk or concern of the possibility of some other future thing happening. In the end, we will be killing ourselves. And by that, I don't mean literally. I mean it figuratively, but I mean it in the deepest possible way. If we are to sacrifice, again, our values set, because our enemy forces us into the situation we have been forced into, to people who, again, want to do us the greatest harm, have made us to play their game. Okay, if we fall into that kind of mindset, if we fall into Ben-Gvir's mindset, if we follow that kind of logic far enough, if what he's saying is the hostages are no longer our main consideration, winning the war is, it is in essence a death toll to the essence of what the state of Israel and the Jewish people represent. Now, I don't mean that lightly, and I don't mean that in a rhetorical way. I mean that quite literally. If, in fact, that kind of mindset were the winning mindset in this argument, to me, it would represent the beginning of an end in a way that I don't even want to begin to fathom. And as I said, Otzma Yehudit and the religious Zionist movements and those that they represent are religious. Their identity is religious. The ultra-Orthodox, who are conceivably more religious than they are the ones who've actually said for quite a while that they support a deal, they support returning the hostages, even with painful sacrifices, even with things that they know inherently bring great risk. And they do that because our tradition, our sages, our rabbis have time and time again said that the returning and the release of captives is one of the most significant mitzvahs that we have. And they don't say that lightly, and they don't say that accidentally. They say that because they lived through periods of time in which it was common, in which it was a regular experience for them to have people taken and ransomed, taken and not to return. And they taught time and time again that life in the end is the most precious thing. Life in the end is the most precious thing. And if we ever hope ultimately for a greater reality in the future, a possibility even of a peace that we can't really fathom at the moment, I don't think it's the nearsighted version of the story. Right? I don't think it's Amram in the beginning of the tale. I don't think it's the one who gives up to a fatalism of a impossible to change outcome. And in the end, I think the Midrash teaches us, and Miriam's wisdom teaches us, that if we make our decisions based upon the what if, and if that what if is completely disconnected from our faith, our belief, our hope that the righteous thing to do will ultimately lead to an outcome that we, again, while painful, brings our people home, then I don't know who we are. And I am relieved to see that in the end, that this deal, at least, again, God willing, will be followed through, and I hope all the phases of them will be followed through, and every one of the hostages, in whatever form possible, will be returned home. But I think we have to be very careful of that kind of mentality that exists within all of us, not just with one member of Knesset or one particular party, right? That part of all of us that I think are looking at this deal and know that it's painful in its way. But we have to bring them home. We have to bring them home. And I believe truly that this is the first step. And I truly, truly believe that if the righteous amongst us, if the leaders amongst us are courageous enough and are able to do what I believe needs to be done, we will return them. And I hope from that point on to build a true and lasting and secure peace for our people, for all peoples. And may it be God's will that it begins this weekend, this Shabbat, this Sunday. With that, I wish you all Shabbat Shalom.
How does Iran play into this?
So I'll give you my 2-minute quick explanation of all these things, because it came up actually in my conversation with Shelley. In a certain kind of way, this deal could not have happened 6 months ago. And by that I mean, before the war up north really got started, before what is basically an almost decimation of Hezbollah, before now the resulting Syrian revolution, the calculus, and before, quite frankly, two significant attempts of Iran to do damage in Israel that resulted in next to no damage, would have been a very different negotiation, a very different calculation. Part of the reason I think in the end it forced Hamas's hand to some degree to have to agree to anything is because in the end it's not, look, Iran is a threat, will always be a threat. That's real. But part of their significant strategy had always been relying on Hezbollah in the north, Syria in the northeast, Hamas in the west, and that each one of them, and the Houthis to some degree in the south, right? Each one of them representing a front at any given time that could be activated at any given time. Now, at this point, really three of those fronts are nothing like what they were even 6 months ago. And at this stage, the amount of influence that Iran has on the ground, I don't think any analyst in the world can look at the situation and say that it's as strong as it was. And I think not only is it not as strong, it is remarkably decimated in the comparison to what it was a year ago, or even really 6 months ago. It doesn't mean anything can be taken for granted. That part of the world, you just can't take anything for granted. But I think what it demonstrates unquestionably to anybody with reasonable observation, the state of Israel is going nowhere. The state of Israel will defend its citizens, its territory with every aspect of itself. And I think equally important that while these days we feel much more isolated than we've ever felt, that the partners that we have in the world, including our country, are ultimately going to be there in support. And so I think, geopolitics is a complicated game. You're never really sure what the next day is going to bring, and you're never really sure exactly who is calling the shots. But at this point, whereas I would have said to you a year ago that Iran was the most significant factor in everything that's going on, I actually think right now their voice is much more muted than it was, as I said, even 6 months ago. But it's not to be complacent because, again, people who say they are out to get you, take them at their word. Right? Don't assume that it's a game. You have to treat it with seriousness. And, obviously the next few days, the next few weeks, the next few months are going to be, significant isn't even the right word. They are going to make all the difference in the world one way or the other. But their capacity to play deal breaker is not insignificant in this case. But if you're asking my personal read, they're not going to get in the way of a deal. That much I don't think. It's not to their benefit to do so at this particular time. But as I said, you have to be ever vigilant. And I'll remind everybody what I say all the time. Read, people, read. Read your newspapers, okay? Read newspapers in particular. If you need to, you can watch television shows, but read newspapers if you can. Read a wide selection of them. Become knowledgeable. Look at maps. Know where these places are. Don't rely on other people to give you that information. You have to know it for yourself. And whether you have a different opinion than I do, which is perfectly valid, right? Make sure that opinion is based in deep thought. And, again, these are the times in our lives where we can't abdicate that responsibility to anyone else. So I hope that answers your question at least a little bit. Little bit. All right, page 586, we'll rise and body our spirit, Aleinu l'shabech, at the bottom of the page.
Aleinu l'shabech l'adon hakol, l'ateit k'duva li'yotzer breshit, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
Now ask those observing Yartzeit or remembering a loved one who's passed in recent months to please remain standing. Everyone else may be seated at this time. We begin by first thinking of those who passed in our community in recent months. Heather Abrams, David Amanoff, Louise Crandall, Mal Daphner, Stephen Dickman, Judith Barry Emanuel, Sharon Lee Goldblatt, Barbara Goldfarb, Harry Heller, Barbara Kushner, Ann Lieber, Robert Lykoff, Jeffrey Miller, James Pappas, Danielle Rigg, William Speck, Harlan Spitz, Charles Spiropoulos, Ronald Tempowski, Alan Stephen Weinstein, Ronald Weller, and Susan Wolfson. We also marked the art sites that occurred during the last week for Samuel Benziner, Leon Blaufarb, Donald Doctorow, our dear friend Richard Gambino, Rose Goodstadt, Elaine Grossman, Mildred Hemowitz, Olive Hennefield, Esther Hirsch, Jesse Hirsch, James Hodes, Kurt Ivers, Harry Karp, Max Katz, Hy Kornfeld, Joseph Lauder, Isabel Lewontin, Mark Mitchum, Rebecca Nevins, Edna Pastor, Theodore Pearl, Saul Rubin, Murray Rudman, Lillian Schwartz, Arnold Spitz, Sylvia Swerdlick, Cindy Robin Taylor, Alan Tishman, and Mark Zimmerman. Is there anyone else saying Kaddish tonight for someone we didn't mention?
It is.
Oh,
It is.
wow. Thank you, Ari. That's quite a yard site. So, anyone else remembering anyone? I'll invite the mourners to join with me on page 598, and if it's your custom to rise alongside them, you may do so at this time. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divrach irutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael b'agala v'zman kariv v'yimru. Amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mevarach le'alam le'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudsha b'richu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata tush bechata v'nechemata d'hamiran be'alma v'yimru. Amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav v'yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. Zichronam livracha, may every one of their memories be for a blessing. Okay, please be seated. Shabbat shalom. Ari, thank you for mentioning that. I didn't know. So for those that didn't hear, Ari said that this is the art site of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, who most of us know, and in my case, a somewhat personal connection through my father, who was one of my father's mentors and teachers, and the main reason why he named the school he created after Rabbi Heschel was that he was probably, outside of my family, the most influential person in my father's life growing up. And continues to be. And for those that have known me for many years, I had to sort of be careful because I found myself constantly teaching Heschel. Like I realized after a while, I was like, okay, every other quote is Heschel's. There's other people. I gotta find a way to get other people involved. But certainly one of the great minds of and great hearts, quite frankly, of our people throughout time. My father wonderfully is the one that bucked the trend. He was in rabbinical school, and I won't tell the story now, but needless to say, he was a little too radical of a personality for the rabbinate at that time. But again, I always say it's not like the jazz singer, right? He didn't like go and do something else interesting. He started a Jewish day school, you know. It's a little bit here or there, but I keep telling him, right, between me and my brother, we need one other rabbi and we've got a Beit Din. You know, he is a much more knowledgeable person. He is much more rabbi than I will probably ever be in my lifetime. And he sometimes gets mail addressed as Rabbi Geffen, and actually even here somebody called him Rabbi Geffen once.
I did.
Oh, you did? Oh, that's right. It was Will. Right. Which also makes him feel really good. So that's a nice thing to do. I probably shouldn't have taken any wind out of his sails, but but my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my great-uncle, my brother, myself, and I'm sure a couple others in there that I'm not thinking about. So we're a very unoriginal family in that way. One other thing I just wanted to note, which is, as I read before, we remember Richard Gambino passed away last year, and Gail, of course, would have been here, but she unfortunately got quite sick with a fever, and so she's not here, but she wanted me to just thank all of you for being here, and remembering him the way that we do. He was a wonderful, really, truly wonderful man. So, a few important announcements. First, of course, is to join us for our Oneg Shabbat as soon as we're finished. I don't know if we have soup this week, but it seems like every week we've got some other delicious thing to enjoy, and most importantly, to enjoy each other, enjoy the company, and to enjoy celebrating Shabbat as a community. Also, a reminder to please join us for services tomorrow at 10 o'clock, followed by Kiddush lunch and, of course, Torah study as well. Reminder also of our continuing Lay-Led Minyan on Sunday at 9:30, a response to the war in Israel. Again, that's available to everybody on Zoom, 9:30s on Sunday. We will also have our next Maureen's Haven shelter on Sunday, January 26th. As always, looking for volunteers, both on the day of, people to make food, people to help with setting up, people with cleanup. Anything that you can do is, of course, deeply appreciated. Also, a reminder, Monday our school will be closed in honor of our federal holiday and remembering Dr. King. So there will be no Hebrew school and the office itself will be closed. However, there will be a virtual Musar group meeting at 7 o'clock on Zoom with Myra. On Tuesday, our anti-Semitism committee will have its virtual meeting at 7 o'clock. Please contact Chair Ann Silver for more information. And then on Wednesday, we have our B'nai Mitzvah class at 3:30, our post-B'nai Mitzvah class from 6 to 7, focusing on anti-Semitism past and present, and our bereavement group, led by Rabbi Ellen Levin, on Zoom from 6 to 7:30. And then a reminder again, Will, your practicum is coming up just like
February 12th, Wednesday, February 12th at 10:30.
very soon. Very, very soon. How are you doing about that? Feeling good?
It's in process.
It's in process. Just for those that don't know, as part of Will's studies at HUC, I think every year there is a practicum.
Every year you give a practicum on some Jewish topic that you've been assigned. Mine for this year is on Shacharit for Shabbat.
Something I have good experience with, so that's, okay, excellent. Well, we hope we can support you either in person or online, and Will send us that information.
Yep.
Any other announcements? Did I forget anything else? All right. So, Will, something that we can end with, and then we'll do Kiddush and Motzi and go next door. And
We are going to close on page 634 with Ki Yishmera Shabbat. Ki Yishmera Shabbat El Yashmereini. Ki Yishmera Shabbat El Yashmereini. Oti ve'omead beino ve'ni. Oti ve'omead beino ve'ni. Ki Yishmera Shabbat El Yashmereini. Ki Yishmera Shabbat El Yashmereini.
Arise for Kiddush, page 123. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratza banu v'shabahat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon inchilanu zikaron lemase v'reishit ki hu yom techila lemikrae kodesh zecher letziat mitzrayim Kivanu v'charta, viltanu kidashta, mikol hamim, v'shabat kodshecha, be'ahava uvratzon, inchaltanu, baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh ha-shabbat.
Amen. L'chaim.
Chaim. Hey. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Shabbat shalom. So humorously, from our comments last few weeks, I guess word got to somebody, and these are different challahs. Challahs have improved, ladies and gentlemen. The challahs have improved.